Good evening, everyone. My name is Kenton Kirby. I am from MenHealing. I'm on the facilitator team. Welcome to the Road to Healing. Before we jump in, I want to actually use a practice that we actually do in all of our meetings and events that we are involved in with MenHealing. Is before we start, we always do a land acknowledgement. So I'm acknowledging that I'm from New York City. I live and work in New York City. But before we start, I want to just have this brief land acknowledgement. So every community owes its existence and vitality to generations and ancestors who contributed to their hopes, dreams, and energy that led to this moment in our history. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn here from distant homes, pursuing hopes, or fleeing violence and poverty. Some have lived here on these lands before many of us even came here. I want to recognize that I live and work on the traditional homelands of the Lenape, who were violently displaced as a result of European settler colonialism over the course of 400 years. The Lenape are a desperate people that remain closely connected with this land and are its rightful stewards. We also recognize that New York City has one of the largest urban indigenous populations in the United States. Please join me in reflecting on the indigenous lands upon which you live and work and travel, and in affirming our own intentions here tonight in healing our history of colonialization and domination. So as I mentioned earlier, my name is Kenton Kirby. I'm so honored to be a part here, to be with all of you in this virtual community. This month, we recognize Sexual Assault Awareness Month. We honor and see all the survivors we honor your bravery, resilience, vulnerability, and healing. We see your strength and hopes and dreams. This event is honoring that, capturing the stories and using those stories to continue in our own healing processes. But before I continue, this event is a collaboration with the Center for Hope and Healing in Lowell, Massachusetts, and MenHealing, and we're so excited for this partnership. The road to healing, as this event has been called, is not a linear experience. There are nuanced complexities, fluctuations, ups and downs, peaks and valleys, but the goal is the same regardless of the road. It's to move forward along our healing journeys, to break the pain and isolation that the harm has caused, and rediscover our joy. So before I hand this off to our amazing panel and our amazing facilitator, Bo, we're going to show a video. And this video features one of our panelists, Richard Smith, and a very close friend of mine. So bear with me when I try to share my screen and video, and we will looking forward to get this started. So hold on.
Hi, my name is Richard Smith, and I am a survivor of various forms of violence that happen in the community, survivor of sexual assault, sexual abuse, child sexual abuse. I'm also an activist, an educator, a healer, and a father. You know, my experience did not happen in a vacuum. It happened within the context of other forms of abuse and also other forms of oppression that were occurring in my community. As an African-American man, growing up during the height of, the war on drugs or the war on communities of color, mass incarceration. So there was a lot of other factors that made my experience of sexual abuse much more complicated, where it couldn't be a singular focus. There were other things that actually might have seemed like they took priority over my personal experience of sexual abuse. All of these other things occurring simultaneously, right? We have, substance abuse issues that are occurring inside of the home. We also have mass incarceration, communities being targeted. And then we also have this historical narrative of Black men being hyper-masculine and hypersexual and all of these things that I'm trying to manage and trying to navigate and figure out while simultaneously dealing with my personal experiences of harm that came as a child. And so like these intersecting like experiences really made it difficult for me to, one, gain a better understanding of, who I was, to, reach out to people for support, because it was something that took place in my community that didn't allow for us to express vulnerability. This was something that we had internalized, we being Black folks had internalized, that we need to just be strong and we need to just push on and we have to be survivors. And it didn't seem like there was a space for me to be vulnerable, to be weak, to be someone who was hurting. And then it started to manifest in like socially appropriate behaviors, which in my case, in my community, was anger, was hypersexuality, that ultimately led me on a path to prison, coupled with these forces that were intentionally targeting my community to try to lock all of us up and capitalize and essentially monetize our trauma and capitalize on our trauma. One of the things that happened during my incarceration that really illuminated that my experience wasn't unique was that I found myself in a group with other men that we were facilitating for ourselves, because, one of the things I always talk about is like, for Black and brown folks, we got prison and, other folks get mental health support, other folks get, services to try to help them heal. And even though I know that like, men don't typically get the support that they need because of patriarchy, because of these other things, it's even more exacerbated for Black and brown folks. And so I found myself in a prison, facilitating a support group to help us heal from other things that we experienced. And then it came to light that we had all been victims of childhood sexual abuse. Nearly all of the guys in the group that I was working with had survived some form of childhood sexual abuse. And another thing that was really illuminating for me was that, many of us experienced sexual abuse at the hands of women, at the hand of adult women, nearly all like friends of our parents. And we didn't even look at that as sexual abuse. We didn't look at that as sexual harm and violence. But we found ourselves in this predicament, kind of acting out on that unaddressed trauma. And then, the criminal legal system just gobbled us up because, we had no concept of what we experienced. We weren't able to communicate in a way that could clearly explain what we had been through. And then we didn't feel comfortable expressing it. But we found that in that space, in prison with each other. Unfortunately, it took that environment. And unfortunately, that environment we were able to create that space for ourselves in that environment, but it doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. Black men should not have to go to prison to create space to heal. That says something that is entirely wrong with our system, our society, where we have to find a safe space in prison to heal. And I know way too many men, specifically Black and brown men, who've had that same experience. Since I've been out of prison, what I've done is I've really tried to recreate that space that we created in prison on the outside. I try to create it for myself. I try to create it for other men, other male survivors, other Black and brown male survivors, more specifically, holding groups, that allow us to like talk and share in a way that we can see each other, we can relate to each other, no other spaces that we find ourselves in, right? And that's something that's been really critical for my continued healing journey. Just being able to communicate and find community with people who can identify and relate to the things that I've experienced, and I can relate to those things. So, that's been critical. Also advocacy, right? Because one of the things I believe is that trauma, distills down to powerlessness. And so the reclamation of my power through advocacy, through the ability to have an influence on people who make decisions that impact my life and the lives of so many other Black and brown men has been a very empowering experience that is also equally healing for me. One of the things that, I've also learned, because, my educational background is in social work. And so, finishing up a PhD now in social work, and my research focus is male survivors of sexual abuse. And so, I kind of understand like the therapeutic approach. I understand like, what mental health means, specifically from a Western perspective. But what I've found in my journey, and this is something that you all should take into consideration as well, is that healing occurs for us in spaces that may not look therapeutic, that may not involve a clinician. It might be a barbershop. It might be, you and your friends kicking it on the basketball court after a game. One of the things that I want folks to realize is that it doesn't have to be a traditional medical, clinical setting that offers us a space for healing. We can create spaces for healing for each other, right? Sometimes just listening and being able to talk to each other in a very vulnerable and transparent way opens us up to realize that, one, we're not alone, because I think that's what happened to me for many years. And to so many other people, you feel like you're alone, so you suffer in silence. But to realize that there are other people who've experienced these things, and also that there are other people who've experienced these things but are also healing. And that's what I kind of like try to let my life exemplify. That trauma is real, specifically sexual violence and sexual harm is real, but healing is also very possible. And if we create the community for each other, we can find a space of healing that allows us to get past those things that have caused us to suffer in silence for so many years.
My name is Bo Van Armstrong. I am the community educator and engaging men and boys advocate at the Center for Hope and Healing. I want to give a big thank you to everyone at Center for Hope and Healing on staff who are helping out today. I want to thank MenHealing for being here and helping collaborate with us for this event. I want to thank our wonderful panelists. And then finally, I want to thank our audiences both here on Zoom and Facebook Live. Today, the panel is going to be recorded. We're going to be posting a video on our social medias, both CHH as well as MenHealing. Hello, folks on Facebook Live, and hello, everyone in our Zoom. I want to quickly tell about a couple of our services that we provide at both our organizations. CHH provides counseling services for all survivors. I personally run a men's group that talks about healthy masculinity, that talks about allyship, that really just creates a community of men that we really, really need. We also have a hotline. We're going to be talking about a lot of tough topics today. And we'd have our hotline for CHH that you can call is 1-800-542-5212. I'll repeat that. That's 1-800-542-5212. Yes. And lastly, I want to introduce our panelists. So I will be bringing them into our spotlight. First, we have Richard. We have, give me a second, Paul. We have Rob. And we have Ben. I would like to just open up the floor and allow these wonderful gentlemen to introduce themselves to everybody. Maybe say how we're doing today and something fun we're going to do this weekend. So I'll pass it on.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ben. I'm from Ventura County, outside of Los Angeles. And I am a survivor of sexual abuse. Bo, did you ask me to say what I'm doing this weekend?
Sure.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed part of what you said. I'm a freelance musician, and I'm currently finishing up grad school at NYU virtually here in California. And so I'm writing a show for my thesis presentation. So yeah, that's what I'm doing this weekend, but I'm happy to be here and meet everyone. So thank you.
I can go next. Hi, everybody. My name is Rob. I'm a survivor, and I am just returning from an incredible mental health conference with more than 4,000 people over the last 3 days in Washington, D.C. And I can tell you that trauma was one of the key focus areas, and it was a privilege to be a part of it, and had a couple different times where I was able to share that I'm a survivor of sexual assault as a child. So glad to be here tonight.
Hey everyone, my name's Paul. I'm currently living in Columbus, Ohio. I'm a survivor. Happy to be here tonight. Great to be sharing this space with everyone. Something fun this weekend. I'm going to be making pancakes for my twin boys and 6 of their neighborhood friends on Saturday. And then I'll spend the rest of the weekend studying because for some reason at this late stage of my life, I thought it was a good idea to pursue a Master of Public Health. And I spend a lot of time trying to learn stuff for that. So I'm happy that I get to do that, but it's daunting at the same time. So thanks. Good to be here.
Hey, Paul. Hey, Ben. Hey, Rob. Hey, Bo. Kenton. Everyone joining. So awkward watching yourself on video. That's funny. And I had the same dang shirt on. That's crazy. Caught me slipping. My name is Richard Smith. I'm also a survivor. And yeah, a healer. I work with Men's Healing as an anti-racism educator. Just supporting their work as we think about ways to expand services for male survivors of color who've been impacted with by sexual harm. So I'm super excited to be here, happy to be here. And I'm looking to have a bunch of fun with my sons, Caleb and Caden, who are 9 and 10. We just goof off, act really silly, and just do a bunch of stuff. I'm currently in Florida in Fort Lauderdale area, so we hit the beach, we ride our bikes. Yeah, I'm all about that. I'm all about that Black boy joy. Hey.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being here. I'm so glad to have you on this panel. I'm very excited to be in this space with you all. I just want to say before we kind of dive into the panel discussion, we'll be having a little bit of a Q&A at the end. So if anybody in the audience, either on Facebook Live or on Zoom, would like to ask some questions, please feel free to DM me in the chat. I will collect those questions and we'll have it at the end, okay? So we just watched an amazing video that wasn't awkward for me, like Richard said, but and I thought it was perfectly long, but I thought it was also very impactful. I wanted to ask the other gentleman here, what are our thoughts on the video that we just saw? What is resonating with you today after you've seen it? And I'll pass that
on. One of the things I thought about watching Richard's video was the long time that I spent with so after doing a weekend of recovery with MenHealing, there were a lot from the Central Ohio area who had gone to a number of the weekends, and we created kind of a support group that met every week. And that was not facilitated. It was just those of us who had been, who had participated in a weekend, and we'd get together and we'd share in that way that Richard was talking about when he was on the inside, and how important that was, and that it was survivors supporting survivors, and I really needed that, and that's one of the big things that came to mind, just how supportive we can be outside of the clinical environment, how supportive we can be of each other.
I can jump in and say that what was so clear to me is how connection drives wellness and how connection drives healing. And you could just see when Richard talked about him being able to talk with other men about what they had gone through, is this immediate healing happens, because for me, it was thinking I was the only person that had gone through this. So knowing that Richard could have that communication inside, and now he's doing that outside, is incredible, and hats off to Richard.
I definitely related when Richard said that his abuse led him to acting out in a way, like hypersexuality and other forms of, behavior reactions, and I've definitely been there. But I also really, it was nice to see a survival arc, like seeing someone go from abuse to survival. And it reminded me of, in some way, that we have somewhat of a responsibility to try and break a curse that could potentially be passed on to generations after us. It gave me great hope. I mean, to see all of us here today, but also to see Richard be able to pass messages of hope to not only the people around him, the guys in prison, but also children who deserve, something better as well for the future. So that was nice to hear.
Rob, you spoke to connection, and we'd come together in this space together, and I think it's an amazing space. It's a space that is unique, that I wish was more available, not only to survivors, but for men. Ben, you just talked about the survival arc, the concept of acting out in this journey that we're on. We call this the roads to healing. That's what we named this event, because you're all on your own road to healing right now. And, we talked about breaking this curse that, is going to go on from generation to generation. I think this is an amazing space we've created. We all have different journeys that takes us to right here, right now. I just want to ask you, gentlemen, what are some barriers on this road? What are some roadblocks that have led you here that you had to overcome? I'll pass that on.
I can start. It's really, in preparation for this conversation, I just spent a lot of time just reflecting on, like, all of the brothers I know who didn't get the support that they needed, didn't have that connection. And, the way that so many of them, their lives ended really early, right? For a variety of reasons. And, I was just thinking about a conversation I had with a close friend of mine yesterday who, and it's interesting you use that word curse, because I kind of shy away from that word curse because it creates this sense of like mystical reality that I don't think people can understand and grasp the possibility of healing when it's in that type of context. But he used that term, right? He is a survivor. He is someone who also has been out here doing the work. He's an organizer for criminal justice reform, but he's still going through the shit, right? Like, and he says, it's like, every time I think I'm good, like, I found myself falling back into some shit, like something happens. And he's like, it feels like I'm cursed. It feels like there's something wrong with me, And so I just thought about all of those folks because I know what that's like to be stuck in that space when it's like, what the hell is wrong with me? And that to me is like one of the major shifts in the trauma work, right? That shift from like something is not, nothing is wrong with you, something happened to you. And then even more so, like something is very right with you. And that's what I try to do, for someone like him who knows that, like, like he's a survivor. But I also want to emphasize that there's a lot of stuff that's right with him. The way that he's using his pain and his experiences to empower and support other people is like clutch, And so, that was definitely, something that I bring to this, right? Because I'm just thinking about, like, I heal for those people who haven't had a chance to heal, who died while they were still struggling with that pain. Yeah.
I think some of the roadblocks for me were, there's a phrase in some of the recovery rooms, trying to get milk from a hardware store, and that I was seeking help healing from people who didn't believe me, or and that could be people within my immediate circle who were part of the whole structure, or even from professionals who tended to minimize things that I shared with them, or so going to an empty well, and not sticking with the for some reason going back to people who didn't support me in this healing journey. And I guess maybe that's if it's a roadblock, I mean, it's one that I kept going back to. So I suppose it was a part of that cyclical lesson, where I'd learn, oh, this isn't a safe place to go for input or for support or for healing. But for some reason then believing that I needed to. I guess my former therapist would call it being dysfunction, being loyal to dysfunction. And I think that was a major roadblock for me. It took me a long time to learn kind of not to be loyal to that dysfunction. Hopefully that made sense. I don't think I was very eloquent in that answer, but.
Yeah, and Bo, for me, the roadblock was really stigma in the overall society, but I realized it was also stigma inside myself. And on the first weekend of recovery that I went to, which is the greatest decision I made in my life, to go to one of the MenHealing weekends, to where I could be among 25 other men, old, young, construction workers, business people. We were unemployed, employed. We all became members of a club that none of us wanted to be a part of. And I can tell you that I left that weekend, and it was still really difficult to think about how I was going to be able to tell anybody about the things that had gone on in my life. And I'm going to give you an example of how that stigma is not just in society, but it's my own stigma as well. This weekend, I mentioned earlier that I was at a mental health conference, and one of the things I did on Saturday was I taught mental health first aid to 50 people. And during that mental health first aid, we know how to do CPR, we know how to do first aid if someone's physically injured, but what do we do when signs and symptoms start arising that are mental health challenges? And I shared just a small piece in the trauma section that I was a survivor of sexual abuse. And I feel that I was one of the fortunate ones that have gotten a lot of resources that I have really had to work hard to find out in the community. And I finished the training. It wasn't a big deal. I've done a lot of work in this space. And a woman came up to me after the training, and she was crying. And she said, I have never, ever heard a male ever admit that they were a survivor of sexual abuse, sexual assault. And she said her brother is a survivor, and he has no idea where to go. And the great news is I was able to, really recommend some great resources such as MenHealing. I told her to look into her local, where there's a domestic violence or sexual assault center locally where her brother lives, but let him know that he's not alone. And so that stigma is not only about society, but it's also about me now being willing to share that story of hope and recovery, that I want others to know that recovery is possible.
I can add to that feeling of stigma within yourself. Big barrier for me was that I was embarrassed about my story, even as I was in a group of other male survivors. I felt that my story was kind of repulsive, and I was really hard on myself. I thought I was placing a burden on the other guys around me and the group leaders. So it took me a while to kind of get comfortable with sharing and just allowing other people to support me. And I went to a weekend of recovery last June at MenHealing, and about halfway through the weekend, I had a little kind of a breakthrough in the group therapy, and I learned that it's okay to accept sympathy from other group members. I don't have to carry it all myself. So that was a big barrier for me, just in terms of transforming myself through just group support groups like that. So a lot of it can live inside your head too as a barrier. There's also financial barriers. I mean, I was so lucky that MenHealing offered some financial assistance to go to their weekend. Not everyone, I want to say a lot more people cannot afford to even like go to one therapy session. But I was able to get a little bit of help for the weekend. And then because it was so healing for me, I was so determined to pay them back. And so like in the months that followed, I saved up some more money and I gave back my scholarship that they had offered to me, because I valued it so much. It really, really helped. I mean, the rest of my year was totally, I had a different lens for it. So finances can be a barrier for a lot of people. And I'm lucky that MenHealing has some assistance that they can offer, and other organizations I'm sure do as well. So yeah.
Can I add a little bit else too? Ben, man, that was amazing. Actually, I just got so wrapped up in what you were saying, because that's so important, right? Accessibility to the services. And that's one of the things that MenHealing is really, being intentional about, really creating opportunities for other folks to have access. And then the other thing that came to mind is like one of the barriers on a personal level for me was just like the role that like patriarchy, homophobia, and like sexual harm played in like denying me the ability to be my full self as a man, right? Feeling, right, because the patriarchy creates these like restrictive guidelines for how you should present as a man, right? Homophobia makes you extremely fearful, especially in Black and Brown communities, of being effeminate or gay or queer, right? And then the sexual harm, that the stigma that they were talking about, and just the misinformation about it, and the way that people understand it, right? Misunderstand it. It left me feeling like I couldn't do things that I felt that were natural to me. Like I love to cook, and I love to like, I'm very domestic, and it's almost like you can't stand a certain way, you can't talk a certain way, you can't pronounce words a certain way, right? Because it's like, and a lot of this stuff is internalized, right? These systems are like acting themselves out inside of our bodies, inside of our minds, to where like we don't even need anyone around us anymore to like say them to us. Like we think about it, right? Why are you holding your hand like this? Or why are you doing that? What's wrong with you? These narratives are in our heads. And at the same time, it's like, it's just denying me the ability to be who I want. And I think that's in general for men, right? Like, patriarchy denies us the ability to be our full selves across the spectrum in ways that, and it's so interesting because I say like, a lot of times folks think that men benefit from patriarchy, but I think patriarchy is extremely crippling to men. And we're just starting to figure out in those ways, in what ways they are, right? Because we haven't been able to fully live because of those restrictions, because of the boxes that it places on us.
We just spoke a lot around accessibility. We spoke about how race plays a role. We spoke about how patriarchy, masculinity is affected in this healing process. I guess I just want to see if there's any more we want to dive into in terms of the intersectionality of your identity and how that affects your healing and how that affects your healing within community as well.
So I'm mixed, and so I don't feel like I quite belong in either one of the groups. I'm half Jewish and half Latino, so I'm in my own little like group. Like I made my own group. Like, sorry. So I don't actually. I'm just saying that because I don't think I have that same struggle of me and a community around me that looks upon healing as a taboo or something. But it's definitely a conversation I'd like to continue having, because sometimes I teach music and I need to have, in a school setting, I mean, like elementary school, high school, and I think to have that consciousness is very important. Even though I personally don't like the Latino community, I'm not really that much in it, and the Jewish community, I mean, they don't like me that much because I'm only half. But I think I'm kidding. I'm not trying to start any kind of fights, but I definitely want to talk about access. It's very important because I know a lot of people in my life, friends, extended friends, people of color, and people of different gender expressions, and I like see them suffer, and I'm like, gosh, if only you had the ability or the confidence within your own community to come out, or if only the community provided you that road to healing, that you could at least see and start walking towards. Like I want that for the people around me too. So yeah.
So I want to mention accessibility a little bit and just kind of acknowledge that, I've just had the benefit of so many of the resources to have so many healers in my life, and that not everybody has that. And I take that very seriously, very to heart about what I can do to try to pay it forward, whether it be, through financial contributions or through other forms of, creating awareness about this. I volunteer for the MenHealing Home Project, and, our committee has been successful at getting information out to the 45,000 computer tablets in the state of Ohio Department of Correction Systems for, all of the people who are experiencing incarceration right now. That's going off a bit on a tangent, but, I don't know what it's like not to be me. But I do have a strong sense that, when my memories came flooding back at 31, and my next right thought was literally to go home and break all the windows out of my house and kill my cats and set my house on fire. And I'm grateful that I had just a kernel of sanity left that allowed me to drive myself to the emergency room. And they welcomed me in there, and they took me in, and they treated me with respect and dignity. They didn't arrest me. They didn't, say that I was a danger to society. When I started talking like this, I was scared that I was going to do these things. And I suspect that a person of a different background might have had a different experience. I don't know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure. And so I do believe it's different for people with different backgrounds. That accessibility is a different kind of thing. And it's easier for me to be open because of my background than it is for other people. And that because I reap such great benefits from so many healers, I do take that very seriously to pay it forward, to give it back, as Ben mentioned earlier. And, there are many ways to do that. And I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to continue doing that.
Something else I wanted to introduce, and I've been thinking about this a lot, right? The process of disclosure and talking about my sexual harm and the role that the internalized responsibility and obligation to preserve the image of my family played, and the fear of like making my family look bad. You know, one of the things that, you know, and I'm sure it happens in many other families, but, you know, I know it's really significant in Black and brown families where it's like, you know, you don't air our dirty laundry. We don't share with the community what's going on in our homes, right? You don't put our business in the streets. And, you know, I don't say that to like shame that. I understand that. That's a defense mechanism. That's a protective factor, right? When you're you know, constantly being scrutinized and targeted as being dysfunctional and unhealthy, right? Yeah, you know, you want to like, you know, you're fearful that if people hear some of the stuff that's going on in your house, right? Even the way that you're disciplining your children or whatever. And then there's this like, you know, this white supremacist notion of what discipline looks like and what, you know, a healthy family looks like. And there's these significant cultural differences inside the family, right? Yeah, you protect the family by not putting your business out there. But also in the midst of protecting the family image under the pressure of that oppression of white supremacy that makes us do that, there's a lot of pain that's kept in the household. There's a lot of violence that's kept in the household. There's a lot of hurt and sexual harm that's kept in the household. And I think about it for me, like, you know, one of the barriers for sharing my story and disclosing was the fear that I would shame my family. I would put my family's business in the street, right? Because, you know, I have parents, right? And then the parents will look bad in the community. How did you let this happen to you, to your son, right? And then the other thing is too, it's like, what if it's the person who caused you the harm is somebody in your family? And this is something about, you know, the response to sexual harm that's, you know, people like Mimi Kim and like folks are really trying to emphasize, like, we don't want incarceration for our uncle necessarily, right? We don't want them to go to prison, right? We may not want the person who caused us the harm to go to prison because we know that prison is not a space for healing. And oftentimes those people who have caused the harm have experienced the harm. And so healing is the real objective. We might want that person to be removed from the home so that there's safety and there's a way to keep that person accountable without sending them to prison. But I don't want to send my mother's youngest brother, right, who was also mourning the death of his mother, you know, to prison. I don't want to send my brother, you know, who experienced sexual harm to prison, right? I don't want to do that. You know, I want healing for them, right? And so I think it's though that's like the family kind of dynamics and barriers that happen inside of our families that are kind of like, you know, perpetuated from one generation to the next, to where we just hide a lot of the shit that's going on because, one, we don't trust that the systems that are in place will provide healing and safety for us. And two, we have this like obligation to like preserve our image as Black and brown people in a world that already sees us as inferior, less than, dysfunctional, uncivilized. But really, we are just people with different cultural expressions and backgrounds.
I want to piggyback on that about wanting healing for others, because I completely align with that. I mean, I don't know why when things were done to me, my reaction was to turn inward and to start harming myself rather than to turn outward and start harming other people. I don't know, is that some mix of chemicals in my brain, some mix of hormones, whatever age I was, you know, is it some, you know, when the synapses fired, did it fire in a certain way for me and it fired in a certain way for other people? And that's not to let people off the hook, but to acknowledge that I really don't know why my story turned out that I didn't set my house on fire, that those times that I woke up in the middle of the night and didn't know who my partner was and thought that I was going to like beat him to death until I was able to sit there and breathe calmly and say, no, you've learned about this, you've practiced this, come back to yourself, and reality will come back to you. Why that was possible for me and isn't necessarily possible for other people, I don't know, but I'm very firmly in the camp of I want healing for people, not this kind of, it's not restorative justice at all. And I remember going and hearing a pedophile who had recently been had been released from prison, in the previous couple of years, and he was speaking to a group of people about his experience and what he apparently he got 10 minutes of therapy a month for 10 years, and then he was released to the community. And then he talked about in this presentation what he needed to do to keep himself safe, thereby keeping others in the community safe. And it was a really important talk for me to listen to. It was difficult to hear, but very important for me to hear what he needed to do, and that it was a struggle for him to keep himself safe and thereby keep other people safe. But that was his ultimate goal. It really opened my eyes a lot to the other side. That was very important for me. Again, not to let people off the hook, but to acknowledge, that like the people in my life who abused me, I wish healing for them. I do. I don't have anything to do with them. They're not at a point where they can acknowledge their part, and I'm not going to continue to go back to that. But it is my hope that sometime in their life that they find healing.
Richard, you said that healing is the goal. And Paul, you spoke to this reaction you had when all these memories flooded back into you. You had these violent reaction to either cause harm to others or cause harm to yourself. Healing is the goal, and we want that. I want to know from you gentlemen that have been on this journey, what would you say to someone who is watching this video right now, a survivor that needs healing or seeks a healing and needs support? What kind of guidance, what kind of advice, what kind of wisdom would you want to share with them?
Well, Bo, I can jump in on that one. I think what helped me the most, it was the scariest and the longest walk of my life, was walking up to a center for domestic violence and sexual assault in my community. And I knew that I needed help, and I knew I needed to go somewhere where someone understood trauma, understood sexual abuse, sexual assault, and finding someone like that where they understand, they could give me new tools, they could teach me new tools, was something that was just instrumental, because I've had different therapists over the years that didn't understand trauma. And I know they were trying their best, they just weren't trained in it. We know that it's 1 in 6 men, we know it's 1 in 3 women. But I can tell you that I had several therapists, and I mean several, who would cry when I would tell them my story. And it was hard for them to be able to then finish the session. And they just weren't there, right? I don't know what that was triggering inside of them as I shared the trauma that I had experienced. So I think going to what was helpful for me was, number one, was a therapist who could guide me, and someone that understood trauma. And I think the second part was really then being in community, being healing through, like I said, through these weekends of recovery. I also used to drive 2 hours to Detroit to a support group for men that were survivors, and it was 2 hours from my house. And I went there because I was hoping I wouldn't find anybody. I wouldn't know anybody there, because I thought nobody's going to drive 100 miles to go to a therapy group. So yeah, I think finding those resources throughout the community, learning that I'm not alone, learning that it was not my fault, and has really been a springboard for, one of the things that we say when I teach mental health first aid is not only is recovery possible, but recovery is probable. and it's the expected outcome, and those are some really powerful words, because I learn more and more every day that the more I'm able to talk about my pain, the less dangerous it is. The more I talk about my pain, the less dangerous it is.
I completely agree with that. The more I talk about it, the less dangerous it is. When I hold it in, it's first I do things to harm myself, and then I begin to feel like I'm going to harm others in some way or another. But to anyone listening, who might have any kind of substance use issue and also be a survivor, I know for me, for my own healing, I have to remain clean, sober, from mood and mind altering substances in order to heal. And in order to heal, I have to stay clean from mood and mind altering substances. The two are inextricably linked. So I can't do this work if I'm not doing that work. I've tried, and it hasn't led to good things. There were people in my life, through the recovery groups that I was in, who shared the same kind of story that I was going through. And I could see that they had their life in some fashion together. They weren't incapacitated like I felt all the time when I first started this journey, and I really hung on to that. I listened to them, and they were speaking from a space that I was living in. They were speaking they were talking about having come from a space that I was living in currently. And I believed through seeing them that it was possible to move out of that. And I really hung on to that and sought more of those people out. I'm kind of like in the mutual aid recovery groups. How did you get through this? How did you do this? How did you handle sobbing, 7 hours a day and then sleeping, for the rest of the hours in the day, and then doing that over and over again, and that's what it was like for a while, and now it's not. And so I just want to say to any people listening who have experienced this, who might feel like you're stuck or it's hopeless, or, my life is really great now. I still have bad days. I still have bad moments. I still have some flashbacks and some intrusive memories, but it is not constant like it was before. And it was constant. And it's not anymore, and so there is hope, there is healing, it is possible. Drive the 100 miles, seek out the people who are healers, find whatever resources you can in your community, and speak your truth. And as Rob said, the pain is less dangerous when it's shared. It less dangerous to me when I let it out.
I would also say that have patience with yourself. It's really one day at a time. It's not going to happen overnight. I will say that there's something strangely joyful about healing. It feels so hopeful, and it feels like you're going to be okay, and you're going to get through this, and you're going to spread a message too to the people around you. There's something that I have found joyful about that. And so that's what I would say to someone, is that there is hope whenever you look for it, and don't give up. Like, it's one day at a time, but it's one of the best things you can give yourself, in this one life that we have. So yeah, patience.
I want to say just a little bit more. The joy in healing, the joy of being able to sit in meditation and to feel physical sensations or see memories that used to incapacitate me, and that I can sit with now and be with and not run scared from. Because there was like this I used to have this little thing like in my brain, like this wall type thing, and that everything that I was trying to avoid was behind that wall. And once in a while, something that I needed would slip behind that barrier, like a phone number. And literally I'd go look for it in my brain and I'd recognize, oh, somehow it got mixed in with this other stuff that I'm not supposed to remember because it's going to hurt me. And I would run from it. Like I would know, like I'd have this like almost physical sensation of running from that area in my brain that I couldn't go to, and that's a real trap to be in, a real prison to be in, right? And to live in that fear all the time. And now to be in the spot where I'm not like that is it's just a different life. It's a different experience of living. And, it comes from doing things like this, from sharing with people like this, from listening to people on things like this, and keeping my mind open to, and doing the work, and that it's worth it. It's worth it. And you can get through it. And I'm going to read some lyrics from Kate Tempest that just real quick that first time I heard them, I was like, what? It can't be true, but where it says, know the wolves that hunt you. In time, they will be the dogs that bring your slippers. Love them right, and you will feel them kiss you when they come to bite. Hot snouts digging out your cuddles with their bloody muzzles. And that is so true for me. I love all parts of me. And those wolves that hunt me are no longer the wolves, they're just part of me. It's a much more peaceful space to live in. And sorry. Thanks.
There's a concept that I talk with Kenton and Jim about. It's injecting joy into the healing process. I had a conversation with a friend today who's a survivor and has been going through a really, really hard month. And he's like, Bo, I don't even want to talk about this month. It's been hard. I don't want to share any of the details, but it's not great. And I was like, well, I'm here to support you in any way I can. I was giving him all the things like, if you need someone to talk to, and he was just like, I just want to talk about something else right now. And we proceeded to talk about our weekend, and we started doing bits, and we started to laugh. And then we had that deep belly laugh that you have with friends. And, we were moving on in the conversation. He's like, Bo, I don't want to be sapping or anything, but I needed that laughter today. I needed that healing. And in that moment, I was like, we just injected joy into the healing process. And it felt really, really good. And it was so good to see my friend laugh in a very hard month that he's having. So I want to ask you, gentlemen, how do you inject joy into your healing process? What do you do to integrate not only healing into everyday life, but also inject joy into your healing in your everyday life?
Hey, Bo, I want to touch on one thing, and I want to answer that to what everyone said, right? But I really want to speak to the family members and the people who are going on this healing journey with us, right? Because although we are creating space that is very healing for us among people who share this experience, we also have a lot of people in our lives and our family that are trying their damnedest to support us in our healing journey. And they may not get exactly what we're going through at the time. And it's very hard for you all too. And whether you're a partner who are just riding it with your partner, understand and love and care and want to see the best for them, or you're a family that's like investing in and like not giving up on someone who's experienced sexual harm, or we're like responding with our trauma in certain ways. Like, I just want to say, like, make sure you take care of yourself, because some of the stuff that we're experiencing and the ways that we're behaving are going to impact you and your life. So I think this is so critical for the people who are in the lives of folks who are survivors to make sure that they care for themselves. And realize that at the end of the day, like, we have to journey through this. You'll be there alongside of us, but we have to journey through this. We have to like take the lead in this, right? And I say that just thinking about all the people, because I've been meeting a lot of people who say like, what do you do? I'm at my wit's end. I've tried everything to help, and it doesn't seem like it's good enough, right? And just know you're doing your best, right? And it's damn hard. And make sure you take care of yourself, you find an affinity group, you find people who can connect with you in ways that, like, you know, because the same way that we needed to find community and folks that could, you know, share our experiences of sexual harm, you know, and that's something that MenHealing is also thinking about too. Like, how do we get that message out there? You know, to make sure that people who are riding with us, our families, our friends, you know, get the support that they need, you know, so they can heal. So I want to say that. And I think one of the best things that you can do as a family member or a loved one or someone who cares about us, you know, who's trying to help, is just like figure out ways that you can connect with organizations and groups that you can like help us get connected with, right? Like MenHealing, right? Because it's going to come to a point where, you know, we'll need that, like we just all described tonight. We'll need that type of connection with people who can understand, you know, in a real, like, visceral, experiential way, that can create the space of healing. And this is not to negate your efforts, but I think it also relieves some of the pressure on you, because I know a lot of you are out there feeling that pressure, feeling like you're not doing enough, feeling like you're failing, feeling like, you know, like, but you're doing enough. And I just wanted to send that message to all of the family members and the loved ones who are standing by our sides.
I want to talk about the joy thing for a little bit. Just real quick, one of the things I did early on was I carried bubbles with me, you know, because, you know, I'd really just break down sobbing, you know, on the regular. And it was a great way to, not to kind of squash it, like to stop feeling it, but to just kind of moderate and kind of come out of it by blowing bubbles, because you can't really blow bubbles when you're sobbing, you know, right? You're crying so hard, you can't breathe, you can't make any bubbles. But if you can breathe evenly and blow bubbles, and then if you're doing it in a place where there are children or even adults, you know, but children, they love bubbles, right? And then witnessing the joy on the faces of children walking by a coffee shop as I'm blowing bubbles to keep myself calm from going into a flashback, and so using that as a springboard, and remembering from a recovery group where someone was talking about what an awful day he was having, and you know, then he saw his nephew, and he asked his nephew how his day was, and his nephew said, "Mikey saw a worm today," you know, and that has always stuck with me, like, oh, that sense of wonderment in the world, you know, because I can walk around with this, or for the longest time, I could walk around with this film over my eyes and look at the world just like a dull film over everything. And if I can embody that sense of Mikey saw a worm today, then everything I see has wonder. And that wonder leads to joy in so many different forms, like bubbles. And I could give a lot of other examples, but I don't want to take all the time. But it is possible to inject that kind of joy into our everyday living, into my everyday living. You know, I have to practice it. I can't expect it just to come to me. And I have to make a point to do it. But as I do it more, the more it becomes part of me, not just a habit, but it becomes actually part of who I am. Thanks.
Yeah, I can add to the conversation on joy to say that I appreciate Richard talking about those that have been on this journey with us. And I've been married for 37 years. And so my wife has been on this journey from the very beginning. And we love to spend time together. And we had 4 kids in 4 years. You can imagine that was a little bit wild as you think about that over the years. And all 4 are married, and all 4 of them are I have 4 grandchildren on top of 4 kids, and 4 in-laws as well. So it's a great feeling to spend time with them. I think the second one is I love to play the piano. And it was actually a negative memory for me as a kid because of the comments that came because I played the piano. And I am grateful today that I can sit down and play. The other night, my wife said she heard me play longer than she's heard me play in years. Because I'm recognizing. And I realized the other day that my therapist in 2013 used to ask me every session, have you played the piano? Have you played the piano? And I really didn't quite understand why she would ask that. But I now know that that's all a part of my self-care. And then I think the third piece would be spending time with authentic friends. And I don't just mean people that are in recovery. I have friends that are outside the recovery circles. They know my story. And it isn't something that is something that has to come up in conversation all the time. And that's great. So those authentic friends of where I can share about my family, I can share about my faith, I can share about my struggles. Just again, somebody that I can connect with so that I continue the healing journey.
I'll say laughter for me. I'm a goofball. Like I come off serious, but like, trust me, I'll be cracking jokes. Kenton knows I'll be cracking jokes. Yeah, that's just it, you know. And the thing about it is like the trauma, and that's the piece, like the hedonism, right? Or the way that the trauma steals our joy, and the trauma stole my joy for many years, where I couldn't laugh authentically, right, and genuinely. And you know, yeah, like I laugh all the time, you know, with my sons, with anyone. I'm telling jokes, you know. And one of my colleagues and mentors, Dr. Bruce Purnell, says, "Misery loves company, but joy is a much better friend." And so I also surround myself with other people who, who are joyful, who like to laugh and be silly. Because there's so much going on, right? But I'll say that the last thing I'll say is like, I think the hardest part, and this is like to anyone who's out there, who's a survivor, who's, you know, in that space, is like, just, you know, you deserve joy, you know? You deserve to be able to laugh and to experience like happiness and joy. And I think, yeah, that's some of and especially the people who do this work, right? I'm going to speak to the people who do the work with survivors, right? Because I think that is an unfortunate reality in the space, where it's like, we feel like we can't take time for ourselves to enjoy ourselves. We feel like we have to stay in the work. We have to be constantly accessible and available to other people when they're going through it, right? We bear this burden of feeling like, if I don't answer my phone or this text, if this person calls me, I'm going, you know, they might die, or they might, you know, something might happen to them because they're in crisis mode. And so I'll say to the folks who are doing this work, you deserve joy too, because joy is contagious. And part of the magic of your healing properties is the ability to share your joy with the people that you're working with, so we can live vicariously through you the same way we experience trauma vicarious through people.
I think Mikey saw a worm today is going right on my vision board right after this. Richard, you talked about the people that are doing this work, you know, and there's a lot of people doing this work. And I know my job is engaging men and boys. My job is to get more men to do this work as well, other than me. I don't know why there's banging above me. But what I wanted to say is that, you know, men are part of the demographic that perpetuate a lot of this harm. I know I wear a mask every single day that says #healthy masculinity. I also wear my company shirts that talk about healthy masculinity on them all the time. A lot of times when I'm out about, people come up to me, they'll ask me about healthy masculinity. I'll share the work that I do. And often the first question I get is, why do you do the work that you do? And, you know, there's no simple one answer for that. People do have a lot of expectations with what my answer is going to be. I don't ever want to really stress on that. I think the reason is not important. I think the work is. So I just want to ask you gentlemen, how can other men support that want to do the support? How can other men be active in healthy masculinity, be active in sexual violence prevention, and be active in the healing process? I know, Richard, you spoke to the what people who are already doing this work can do. What can somebody who's watching this video, what can they do? What can be their first steps in helping in this process?
Quick, I think the first thing that people need to, like, the first step in the process of healthy masculinity is listening to women. Like, we need to stop talking and listen to women and what their experiences are. as a result of some of the harm that comes from toxic masculinity. And, you know, that was what was like really critical. A dear friend of mine, RJ McConey, they do in New York, they do an Undoing Patriarchy, like workshop for men. And the most significant part of that, you know, experience for me was, you know, just having two Black women like share what their day is like being a Black woman in a world filled with, you know, so much toxicity and around masculinity and potential harm and violence that they experience. And hearing them was like, oh shit, right? So yeah, listen to women, especially listen to Black women. They'll tell you.
Would it be listened to everyone though too? Like because I'm thinking like when I share with when I share with men, and I don't want to use any bad words, but you know, like a macho dude saying don't be a, you know, the word that begins with a P, and it's like, oh, okay, I know not to share with you. You know, I just kind of broached the subject and I was shot down immediately. And so, you know, any men that share with you anything, just stop and listen, ask questions. You know, what are you feeling? Why are you sharing that? Might be a good start, just kind of continuing the conversation and not shoot it down out of discomfort, and not minimize. So, you know, there's some things that I've shared with, you know, men close to me, you know, just a little bit of my story. And like one of the questions will be, well, how often did that happen? You know, as if once wasn't enough, you know, like, you know, so yeah, listen and don't minimize, if I guess, or two, if I was going to give any advice to anyone who was asking.
I'd definitely add to that. I mean, same thing, just have some curiosity. The world is not black and white. There are nuances to everything, and active listening is very important. Not always needing to give advice is important. Not everyone needs it, and sometimes listening is just everything that someone needs in that moment. And also, I think walking away is such an unmanly thing. Not to get sexist, but so many times I've seen a guy like just say, oh yeah, let's I don't want to talk about that, and they'll walk away, close the door, or get in their car and leave or something. And it's like, that is, I don't know, it's not very, it seems cowardly to just abandon something. And it's okay to stay, it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to be gentle, be a gentleman, you know, it's okay. There's something so caring about staying. And yeah, there's a lot of things that could be done, but that's a good place to start. Yeah. It's okay to cry too.
Waiting for some questions to come in. I've not gotten a ton. In fact, I've gotten 0. But I did want to give some space for you gentlemen to talk about the work that you do. I know a lot of you do stuff in these fields, and just want to give some space to allow you to speak to that. I do also want to say that, you know, we talked about listening and believing in survivors. And I do want for folks to know that may be watching this, CHH and MenHealing, we believe all survivors. If there's ever a moment where you need help, you need support, you need someone to listen to, you want counseling, you need resources, we're here. We're here with open arms, and we're here to listen. We're here to believe you, and we're here to help out in any way that we can. So I'll pass it back on to you, gentlemen, if you want to take a minute to do any self-plugs.
I'll go first. Yeah, I think my business bro and I, Jorge Vidal, just we're getting ready to launch something really new and special and near and dear to my heart called alignment, with this belief that, so much of what we experience in life that causes us harm and causes us suffering is connected to our misalignment, whether it's individually, familially, communally, or, systematically. And, the way that we support is we help organizations who are doing this work, like figure out ways to bring about that alignment. Starting with the ways to create spaces of healing for the folks that they work with, specifically organizations that are led and ran by folks who are formerly incarcerated or survivors, which is like a big part of where we're heading, right? The recognition of the value of people who have direct experience and the capacity for them to support the healing journey of others. But too often that leaves those people who are doing that work unable to continue their own healing journey. So how do you create communities of care within these organizations that are rooted in healing practices that are, driven and supportive of the people who are doing the work? That's something that I'm really passionate about, because I've worked with a lot of nonprofit organizations and I've seen a tremendous amount of harm that's happening in those spaces. And it's all trauma. It's all unadjusted trauma. People come in with great intentions, but, if we're still hurting, inevitably that harm is going to influence the culture of the organization. And so that's one of the things that I do. Then, obviously my role with MenHealing as an interracial educator, supporting them with really expanding. I follow the lead of Paul too with the Home Project. So, which is, it's crazy. I keep thinking you're a volunteer, Jesus, Paul, like you're doing that work so like fantastically. I admire you, your courage and your commitment to really creating, healing spaces for everyone, especially currently incarcerated people, especially as a person who was previously incarcerated. So thank you for that. And yeah.
One of the things that's really helped me in my recovery is sometimes when I'm hurting the most is when I have this opportunity to volunteer or to serve others. And it gets me outside of myself. And so one of the things that I want to do is also give back to the organizations that have been so helpful to me. And so MenHealing with the Weekends of Recovery, I'm now on their board. And it's incredible to think that I went from not wanting to let anyone know that I was a survivor to now helping with the future direction of where MenHealing is going. And the other piece of it is in 2018, I started telling my story. I started telling my story because we talk a lot about disability space in corporate America, talk about a lot of physical disabilities, but we don't talk about the hidden or the non-visible disability. And I've begun to share back in 2018, and I'm sharing in Boston in a couple of weeks. I know that it's called the Boston College Corporate Citizenship Conference, and I'm going to share my story because I think it's important for others to know that there's hope, and there's hope that comes from healing, and there's growth that comes from the healing as well. So thanks.
I want to say thanks to Richard for that shout out. It's a real joy to be able to help people. My life for so long was at the intersection of sexual violence and addiction, and could so many times have included incarceration, but did not for whatever reason. And starting in 2020 through a lot of work, but also a lot of fortunate series of events, we were able to get recovery literature on 45,000 tablets in Ohio for the incarcerated. And because of that, it led to Arizona being able to do the same in their Department of Corrections for another 40,000 people. And, we're up to, close to 150,000 tablets now with, drug addiction recovery resources that are on the tablets, don't have to be downloaded, don't have to be paid for by a commissary. And so from that kind of jumping point, then, I approached people at MenHealing because they had been so central in my healing to place similar resources from MenHealing on the tablets. And so we've been successful in Ohio with, we're on our third rollout now with a few videos. And then we just spoke with another State Department of Corrections last week. I don't want to say which one it is yet until it's successful, but fingers crossed that we're going to get, healing resources played on common areas. It's not going to be able to hit the tablets, but it'll be on monitors in common areas of the prisons for them to be able to see and begin, exploring healing for themselves while they're on the inside. And I'm very hopeful about that. So I just want to say thanks for, the universe, all the people, everyone here. It's not me. It's I'm just a vessel, right? But it really brings me a lot of joy and purpose. So I used to have survivor guilt. Now I feel like I have survivor purpose.
Thanks for saying that, because I carry a lot of survivor guilt still now. My trauma is more recent. It ended 2.5 years ago. So I'm still in the process. But I love that saying that survivor purpose. That's really, I'm going to hold on to that. I guess my way of giving back is not as hands-on, admittedly. I'm actually going to, I'm a composer, so I'm going to write an opera about my abuse, hoping that whatever audiences watch it, they can have their minds changed, and a conversation can be opened up. So that's something that's been on my mind, is turning my abuse into art. And then, just trying to destigmatize the whole thing, one story at a time, I guess. And there's something dreadful about sharing something so intimate that happened to me in a work of art that's going to be, performed for an hour and a half or whatnot. But part of me is also thinking, with too much silence, people's stories being silenced, for me, it doesn't do good for me to not talk about it. So that's my way of, I guess, give back. And it's not as hands-on, but it is something. I don't work in mental health, but I'm so grateful for men's groups. I just yesterday, MenHealing opened up their registration for the August weekend of recovery in Utah. And I am so happy to register for that. And I look forward to going. Now that I've done the one weekend last year, I know what to expect, and I'm, very excited for another weekend of recovery. So thank you.
We are at 6:30. I'm going to take some executive decisions, say we can go a little bit over. I'll let every gentleman here do kind of their final thoughts, final farewells. And then I did get 2 questions I'm going to put in the chat, and I'll say right now, if you want to just quickly touch on them, pick one and please do. And then we'll do a little closing. So the first question we got is, how can survivors who are women show solidarity to men who are survivors? And then the second question is, being a survivor is a power and tender identity. What would you tell young people who share this identity and aren't sure about how to move towards healing? So I'll let you guys do your closings. And then also, if you wanted to answer any of these questions, please do so.
I'd just like to a quick touch on the how can survivors who are women show solidarity to men who are survivors. When I first started this journey, there was one incest survivors anonymous meeting in this area, and it was held in a women's facility. And, you know, I went in a desperate state seeking help, and I was told that I could not enter the building. And that was a little bit of trauma there, but there was one person who decided to come out and talk with me in the parking lot, and you know, stuck with me for a good 30-40 minutes, and that was really amazing that she took that time. The facilities rules were the facilities rules, but she recognized that here was a fellow survivor, and you know, came out and helped. So that's the first thing that came to mind. And just in closing, I just want to say thanks for putting this on. Thanks for allowing me to be part of it, be part of the space. And for anyone listening who's, you know, when I first started going through this, I really did not see a happy future for myself ever. And it took a while before I started seeing glimpses of that, and the glimpses then became a reality. And so if it's possible for me, I think it's possible for anyone. Just keep reaching out, keep doing the work. Thanks again.
Yeah, I would say to the question about if young and not sure how to move towards healing is, when I mentioned about the weekends of recovery, I said they were young and they were old. And I know we've had people as young as in their 20s up until later in life. And so it is a service. It's a ministry that's to all people. And so young or old, I mean, I would just say, be patient with yourself. And again, it's great to be a part of this evening. It's life-changing when we all come together and heal together in community.
Thank you everyone for having me and listening to me. Sometimes I get a little nervous on these panels, but it's been such a warm welcome. And what I would say to young people who also are survivors is that you have so much life ahead of you. And it's okay to say no this young. It's okay to say yes. Trust your instinct. Surround yourself with people who are aligned with your healing or who will be. And it's okay to say goodbye to people who are not going to align themselves with you. And don't give up, you know, still invest in yourself because you're so young. Yeah, so much to say to the young ones, but yeah, anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you everyone again. And it's nice to talk with you guys.
I just want to say I'm super proud of everybody who spoke, and like I applaud you on your journey, and your openness to share your stories and support other people. You know, I just love it. I just love that we can create this space and do this for other people, for ourselves, and for others. You know, and hopefully y'all have my info. Y'all can connect me whenever you want to connect with me. Bo, Center for Hope and Healing. I think y'all dope as hell. Like, I checked out your site, the work y'all doing. Bo, the work you're doing. Man, I'm so proud of y'all. Like, you know, I rocked with Boston for a long time, and I didn't even know about y'all. So just know that I'm gonna be blowing y'all up and putting y'all out there, because I respect everything that you're doing. And just thank, you know, everyone else who attended, like, and taking the time to hear us, and share it. And there's gonna be a recording of it, so you can share it with other people who couldn't make it tonight. So share this, so your people who need to get a little some of this healing. All right, have a good night, everyone.
Yeah, Richard, you should have just done the closing for me. I want to thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Rob. And thank you, Ben. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for your words. They're greatly appreciated and very welcomed. And I also want to thank you for sharing this space and allowing others into this space with us. So yeah, we're going to be ending things. A quick more plug for all our counseling. We do provide counseling service at the Center for Hope and Healing. If you were a survivor, you can go onto our website. MenHealing also has a website at menhealing.org. Brotherhood of Strength is a program that I run. If you are a man who wants to have community, if you're a man that is a survivor or is an ally, or just someone that wants to learn more and have some community, you're more than welcome to join. Again, our hotline is 1-800-542-5212. Center for Hope and Healing, MenHealing. We are in trauma-informed organizations, and we're here to help in the best ways that we can. So thank you all. Thank you, staff. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, CHH and MenHealing. And then again, thank you for those folks on Zoom with us today. And thank you for those that are on Facebook Live and are watching this video. And with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you for joining us tonight.